You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let me bring you an update on a vehicular manslaughter case from 2020. It began with a couple who met for drinks at a restaurant in Westlake, California. 57-year-old Rebecca Grossman consumed at least 2 margaritas and some Valium when she was out with her boyfriend, 55-year-old Scott Erickson. Now, Scott is a former pitcher for the LA Dodgers, and he was driving a 2016 black Mercedes GL63. And Rebecca was driving a white Mercedes GLE 43. As the two left Julio's restaurant in their separate cars at about 7 p.m. on that September 2020 evening, they began racing each other through the neighborhood streets. The speeds of each car reach between 73 miles per hour and 81 miles per hour. It's a 45 mile per hour zone, and it's residential. When the pair in their individual Mercedes reached a crosswalk, Rebecca mowed down 2 young brothers who were utilizing the crosswalk with their mother and younger brother. Now the mother, Nancy Iskander, she tried to stop the young boys, but they had already entered the crosswalk when Rebecca raced towards the intersection. 11-year-old Mark Iskander and 8-year-old Jack Iskander died within hours of each other from the injuries they received when they were impacted by Rebecca's car. Now, it was approximated by a crash expert that Mark was launched 250 feet from the crosswalk due to the brutal force of the impact. Investigators also said that that impact was the equivalent force of dropping the Mercedes SUV on the boys from the height of a 12-story building. And then Rebecca, she just kept driving for a half a mile, but her SUV registered the impact and shut down all systems, so she couldn't drive any further. Now, pictures from the scene show a scooter in the middle of the 3-street intersection, and a helmet and rollerblades were abandoned on the sidewalk. The white Mercedes was also photographed with front end damage. Mark was pronounced dead at the scene. And Jacob, who was flung 50 feet from the crosswalk, was given life-saving measures like CPR. And all of this happened right there on the sidewalk in front of his parents and his sister and his younger brother. Now, Jacob was then rushed to the hospital, but he died a few hours later. Following the investigation, Rebecca was arrested in December of 2020, and she was charged with 2 felony counts of murder and vehicular manslaughter. She was also charged with 1 felony count of hit-and-run driving that resulted in the death of an individual. Now, Rebecca pled not guilty to the charges, and she immediately posted her $2 million bail. Because, see, for Rebecca, $2 million was really not that big a deal. And here's where it gets a little scandalous. Rebecca is married, and it's not to the ex-MLB pitcher who was racing with her that evening. See, her and her husband, Dr. Peter Grossman, started and worked at the Grossman Burn Foundation and the Grossman Burn Center. Now, the center treats burn victims from around the world, and the foundation acts as the philanthropic arm of the medical institution. Dr. Peter Grossman is a skilled plastic surgeon who performs reconstructive surgeries on burn victims. And Rebecca, who is the mother of 2 children, was the strong arm of the charity work. She was named by the American Heart Association as Woman of the Year in 2007, and she has won other honors for her work in human rights and domestic violence prevention and humanitarian purposes. Her bio lists her as the past publisher and editorial director of Westlake magazine. And her LinkedIn page states she is the CEO of Powerhouse Lux Media, which produces the Westlake magazine as well as the West Luxury and Paragon Healthy Lifestyle magazines. But Peter stuck it out, and it seems he has stood shoulder to shoulder with Rebecca as the investigation carried forward and as it finally went to trial in January of this year. Rebecca has maintained through the nearly 4 years that she was not drunk and that she did not hit the boys. At the scene, she blew a .076, which registers just below the legal limit of .08. And her blood tests came back with indications that she did have Valium in her system. And like I said, her car has front end damage. Now, the prosecution chose an unusual route with the charges. They opted to not charge her with driving under the influence. Now, that charge would have been an add-on to potentially prove gross negligence in the fatalities. During the trial, the prosecution introduced evidence that they felt showed Rebecca had a conscious disregard for human life and that she knew her speed could be dangerous on a suburban street with pedestrian traffic. They admitted evidence of a 2013 speeding ticket that had been given to Rebecca, along with a warning by the officer that speeding is dangerous and can kill. Now, that ticket clocked Rebecca at 92 miles per hour on the 101 freeway. The defense did get that officer, however, to admit that he gives that warning to pretty much every driver, and it just wasn't specifically meant for Rebecca. Now, more text messages from Rebecca's phone were admitted by the prosecution when they showed communication between Rebecca and a friend back in 2022. Okay, this was 2 years after the accident. Now, during that texting feed, Rebecca admitted that she saw Nancy Iskander fall and that she became distracted while driving because of the fall. Now, that text contradicted what she had told investigators, which is that her airbag spontaneously exploded and she couldn't see what was happening. Well, the prosecution also put that crash expert on the stand, who said that Rebecca's high-tech SUV couldn't recognize that children were in the crosswalk because the rate of speed was so elevated that the high-end vehicle stops looking for small children at about 45 miles per hour. Now, another prosecution strategy was to reveal to the jury the affair that was going on between Mike and Rebecca. Rebecca's daughter even told investigators that Mike was her mother's boyfriend. Text messages retrieved from Rebecca's phone also revealed a relationship where the two were even cohabitating together at times. And you might be thinking, what does that have to do with her hitting the two boys? Well, the defense kind of opened the door. Rebecca's defense team made a claim that another car hit the boys first, and then Rebecca's car came along at a high rate of speed. So, the prosecutors in pretrial hearings got the approval of the judge to explain that the two were driving and racing near each other because they were a couple. After that ruling in the pretrial hearing that the relationship could be included, the defense strategy changed slightly. They knew they were going to contend another car hit the two boys before Rebecca. So now that other car was Mike in his black SUV. And guess what? Mike didn't initially stop at the scene. Therefore, his car was not immediately inspected by investigators, and therefore, no potential evidence could be introduced by the two sides showing if that car had damage and if Mike hit the kids first or not. But during the trial, the same crash expert, well, he testified that Mike's Mercedes, which is a slightly different model than Rebecca's, well, he said it sits too high from the ground for Mark's body to have flown upwards. He testified that Mark was not tall enough for a car with that kind of ground clearance to propel Mark upwards. Now, according to the expert, debris at the scene also did not match Mike's model of Mercedes. A fog lamp was found amongst the debris, and Mike's car doesn't have fog lamps. So I said Mike didn't stop at the scene. But Rebecca's daughter did say she saw Mike lurking in some bushes near the scene as the investigation unfolded that night. And Nancy Iskander testified to the horrors of that day. She told jurors that she did in fact see Mike's black SUV as she grabbed her 5-year-old son and pulled him to safety. She testified that if she had not jumped out of the way with her youngest child, they would both be dead as well because they would have been hit by the black SUV. She also testified that she had no doubt that the white SUV was the car that struck and killed her two boys. Now, 3 eyewitnesses also testified at trial that they saw either one or both boys hit by a light-colored SUV. One of those witnesses said he saw the two cars changing lanes and competing for positioning while driving at high speeds. He testified the lighter color vehicle hit Jacob and sent him flying to the sidewalk. And remember that part where Rebecca told a friend in text messages that her airbags just went off and that she couldn't see what was going on? Well, the deputy who responded to the fatality testified that he found Rebecca standing outside of her dented white Mercedes nearly a half a mile from the intersection. He said he noted front-end damage and a buckled fender on the passenger side. She told the deputy that her airbags went off and she didn't know what was going on, but she must have hit something and she wasn't sure what she hit. And another witness whose testimony for me just highlighted the tragedy of all of this, well, that witness was Mike's former teammate, Royce Clayton. He testified that he was actually at Julio's restaurant with Rebecca and Mike on the night of the crash, and that he did witness them drink alcoholic beverages. He said the three had planned to meet up later that night to watch a presidential debate, because the crash happened just 1 month prior to the 2020 general election. But he never made it to Mike's home because he had spoken with Mike, who explained the crash to him. Now, the prosecution asked Royce if he was still friends with Mike, and he said the following: "No, I have kids. I just don't understand how Mike could be so negligent and be responsible for running down kids." Okay, that's heartbreaking. But also, it's concerning, since his statement makes it sound like Mike was the one who ran the kids down. Well, the prosecution was concerned by the remark as well, and they wanted to put Royce back on the stand to clarify that he meant Mike's actions led to Rebecca running the kids down. Well, the judge ruled Royce could not be recalled to the stand. So, the 6-week trial came down to this: the prosecution presenting that Rebecca's negligent behavior resulted in the murder of 2 children, and the defense saying that the killing of the children was done by Mike's SUV, not Rebecca's. Well, the jury agreed with the state, and Rebecca was found guilty of 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter, and 1 count of hit and run. When the guilty verdict was read aloud in the courtroom, Rebecca's daughter, Alexis, cried out, "Oh my God, oh my God," as tears ran down her cheeks. Peter Grossman just held Alexis, trying to calm her, as Rebecca, who was also crying, was handcuffed and taken into custody and jailed. After the verdict, Mark and Jacob's dad, Kareem Iskander, told reporters that he was grateful for the jurors' patience and that now his family can get some closure. And Nancy Iskander thanked the prosecutors for going above and beyond in their jobs. She said that we all have a justice system we can trust now. She also said it didn't bring her joy to see Rebecca in handcuffs. She said that her heart broke for Rebecca's children and that she doesn't have hate for Rebecca. She said the trial wasn't easy, but that it does bring a form of closure. So you might be asking, what happened to Mike? Well, he worked with prosecutors, and while denying any wrongdoing, he was at one point charged with a misdemeanor in connection with the crash. A judge in 2022 dismissed that charge when Mike agreed to use his fame and influence and produce a public service announcement for teens about the importance of safe driving. Now, I brought you this story from back in February because there was an update that occurred just last week. Rebecca's attorneys claimed from the moment the verdict came down that they were shocked that the jury reached the conclusion that they did. They have several reasons why they say the verdict should be thrown out. They said the evidence was insufficient. They said it was unrealistic for Rebecca to understand that speeding on that exact street could cause death. They said the testimony about the prior speeding ticket should not have been allowed. They also claimed the charges didn't fit the crime, meaning the evidence didn't match up to the required elements of second-degree murder. Now, the prosecution said the defense claims weren't true and that the people proved beyond a reasonable doubt that there was implied malice in Rebecca's actions. Well, the judge agreed, and Rebecca will not be granted a new trial. The judge stated that the speed and the impaired driving were enough to warrant the charges and the verdict. She will be sentenced later this week. She could face up to 34 years in prison. I'll let you know in the next episode how that turned out. However, a civil suit has also been filed against Rebecca, Mike, and the Department of Transportation. The latter is included in the suit since the intersection had already been up for debate about the need for a signal. Let's remember Mark and Jacob. Mark was well known for his joke telling. He would often be seen with adults in a gathering sharing their favorite jokes. One of his jokes was shared at his memorial service. Here's how it goes. Visiting a new town overrun with ducks, two women are told that stepping on one will lead to dire consequences. One woman disregards the warning and is forced to spend an eternity with an ugly old man. The other treads lightly and is ultimately rewarded with a handsome suitor. That woman said, "I don't know what I did to deserve this," as she cast her eyes to heaven. And the man said, "I don't know either, but I did step on a duck." Now, Nancy said that was her favorite joke that Mark used to share. And little Jacob was the one to ask questions, always inquisitive about his surroundings. The family are faithful churchgoers and assured those who are trying to comfort them that they know the boys are happy and well. Nancy said she wants Jacob and Mark to be remembered as loving life and loving God. And now let's bring you an update from the sports world, where a whole saga followed the world's #1 golfer, Scotty Scheffler. This all happened in May of this year. And I thought it might be over, but more happened this week. So let's take a quick look at the Louisville, Kentucky Police Department and the run-in that occurred between them and Scotty. Okay, so there's this PGA championship that was happening in Louisville on May 17th at the Valhalla Golf Club. And prior to Scotty needing to be at the club, a fatal accident occurred that was associated with the PGA tournament. John Mills was working security for the major tournament. He was struck and killed by a bus while walking around outside the club and course on Shelbyville Road. Now, this happened at 5 a.m. the morning of the tournament. The shuttle bus was traveling in the center lane of the road, and it's supposed to do that when an event is happening. That lane becomes dedicated to shuttle buses. But the 69-year-old was struck when he entered the lane, and he was killed instantly. John was retired, and he enjoyed spending his time working security for events like the PGA tournament. That fatal collision caused a traffic jam that delayed the start of the PGA Championship's second round, which was slated to begin at 7:15 that morning. And Scotty was stuck in that traffic jam. Scotty was scheduled to start his round at 8:48 a.m. So they tried to move Scotty's vehicle through. Scotty pulled into the oncoming traffic lane in order to move past the stopped vehicles. LMPD Detective Brian Gillis was standing in the middle of the lane that Scotty pulled into. He was wearing a high-visibility, yellow reflective rain jacket when he stopped Scotty's car and attempted to give him instructions. The detective noted that Scotty refused to comply and said Scotty accelerated forward, dragging Detective Gillis to the ground. And Detective Gillis was transported to the hospital by EMTs, saying he was suffering from pain, swelling, and abrasions to his left wrist and knee. Now, due to the altercation with Detective Gillis, Scotty was arrested that morning at 6:20 a.m. He was booked into the Metro Corrections Facility at 7:28 a.m. on charges of second-degree assault, third-degree criminal mischief, reckless driving, and disregarding signals from an officer directing traffic. Now, this isn't a light charge. Second-degree assault is a Class C felony in Kentucky and is punishable by law from 5 to 10 years in prison. Now, Scotty was released and made it to Club Valhalla shortly after 9 a.m. And due to the fatality, tee times were pushed back and Scotty started his round of play at 10:08 a.m. 1 week later, all charges were dropped in regards to the incident. Okay, that's the backstory. Here's the update. On Friday, new footage of the incident was released as part of an administrative incident report. In that footage, Scotty admits on police body cam footage obtained from the morning of the incident that he did drag Detective Gillis, but he also consistently denies that he knew the man was part of law enforcement. He said he reacted because Gillis reached into his vehicle and grabbed his arm. He also stated that Detective Gillis didn't identify that he was part of law enforcement. The incident report also shows that 3 officers, including Detective Gillis, failed to activate their body cameras. According to the incident report, a supervisor said Gillis made a, quote, tactically poor decision by reaching into a vehicle that is running, is in drive, and the operator has the ability to pull away or accelerate. Now, another supervisor said, given the charges at the time were only traffic offenses, Gillis acted poorly by adding layers of risk to what amounted to a misunderstanding over a traffic violation. Now, the additional body cam footage does show Scotty apologizing to Detective Gillis when Detective Gillis approaches the car where Scotty was being detained. During the investigation, Gillis was counseled regarding the risks he took, but the report stopped short of calling his actions a policy violation. But it is against department policy to not have body cameras active during duty. Now, Scott does contend that Detective Gillis hit his car with the flashlight he was holding that morning. The report does not indicate if the other two officers were counseled about their lack of body camera activation. The final call by the report. It was really just all a big misunderstanding, and that the evidence corroborates that finding. This week, Scotty Scheffler will face his first large major tournament, and when he competes in the U.S. Open, he finished 8th in that PGA tournament following his arrest. All right, let's finish with this story where a string of Lego thefts has led to the arrest of a 71-year-old who seems to have some sticky fingers. Okay, first off, we need some backstory here. Bricks and Minifigs. That's a Lego reseller that stocks minifigurines, accessories, and Lego bricks. Well, it has more than 100 stores across the United States. But 6 specific Bricks and Minifig stores in Southern California were experiencing a rise in shoplifting and theft. The Riverside, California store was the first one burglarized on April 3rd. Then an Ontario store on April 12th, followed up by the Whittier location on May 3rd and the Irvine Bricks and Minifigs on May 9th. Finally, the Mesa and Fullerton locations were stolen from on June 1st. Okay, that's a strong 2-month crime spree for Legos. But why these particular stores? Well, most of them carry unique Lego sets, like maybe a set from 20 years ago that isn't easily attainable now. Some of those individual figurine sets go for $500 to $600 a piece, and they also resell quickly on the internet. So here's how it went down in the 3rd store that was burglarized, which, remember, was in Whittier. 2 men were recorded on surveillance footage arriving at the store in the early morning hours. The men worked as a team, with one serving as the getaway driver of a blue car, and the other man enters the store. At Whittier, the thief was wearing a face mask, a hoodie, and a baseball cap. He approached the front door with a tool, and he broke the glass at the entrance. He then swiftly moves through the store with a large trash bag, collecting figurines. At the Whittier store, the man only became spooked when he raised his head, and the light he was wearing around his noggin, well, it cast a shadow of 2 Batman figures on the wall. In the video, he created his own jump scare, and then he ran from the store. Now, the store owner told the LA Times that Batman saved the day because the man's trash bag wasn't completely full. And here's a pretty awesome part of this story. This group of collectors and franchise owners are so tight-knit that they began sharing their experience with others so that those owners of the other stores can enhance their security systems and maybe add gates to their doors. One Southern California owner of a Bricks and Minifigs even installed a special ADT film over the glass of the front door, making it much harder for the thieves to break the glass on the entrance. So there is a twist to this story. That 71-year-old who was arrested, well, he might not even be the guy who burglarized the Whittier store, because this type of thievery is becoming more common. But police are working to identify if that 71-year-old Richard Siegel is the guy, because the LAPD arrested him on Wednesday at his home. And the stash of stolen Lego sets is staggering. The LAPD started tracking online Lego sales, which led them to Richard Siegel. Then they started tailing Siegel and his 39-year-old friend, Blanca Gudino. On June 4th, they witnessed Gudino steal Legos from a retailer in Torrance and also in Lakewood, California, both on the same day. Gudino then delivered the sets to Siegel's home in Long Beach. When they served the search warrant on Siegel's house, they found 2,800 individual boxes of Lego sets. While the police were searching the house and seizing the stolen goods, buyers showed up to purchase the toys that had been advertised online. Now, police arrested both thieves and charged Gudino with grand theft and Siegel with organized retail theft. And according to jail records, Siegel has been released on his own recognizance and is scheduled to appear in court on June 26th. Gudino, however, is being held on a $20,000 bond. And like I said, they might not even be the duo that robbed the 6 bricks and minifigs in Southern California, because back in April, California Highway Patrol investigators arrested 4 people in LA and Orange County for similar Lego thefts. Now, those 4 are being accused of stealing a combined $300,000 worth of Lego sets from big box stores like Target or Home Depot and Lowe's. Now, the 4 arrested in that crime ring were 44-year-old Jeremy Johnson, 39-year-old Marta Hart, 47-year-old Chung Pei Yu, and 35-year-old Shen Li. And none of those suspects live together. It seems they are the Lego version of Ocean's 11, but like Lego 4. Now, in the case of the Lego 4, they seem to be utilizing online sales, but also sales at swap meets and also selling to smaller businesses. So, side note, I pulled the info about the Lego 4 from the social media account of California Highway Patrol. And who knew Legos were sold at Home Depot and Lowe's? I searched HomeDepot.com and I found Lego luggage. So maybe individual stores retail Lego sets that aren't available online. I just don't know. I also checked online for penalties for grand theft in California, and each charge of grand theft can range from 16 months to 3 years. So that's what Gudino is facing. And then I looked up organized retail theft. The penalty is exactly the same. So maybe Siegel was released because at 71 years old, you aren't much of a threat to society. I'm just speculating here. I hope the recovered Legos can be given to children who are less fortunate, or even to adoption centers or even abuse centers to use for when kids need a safe place while reporting their abusers. Whatever happens with the merchandise, please let it be wholesome. Well, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. If you're loving the content, please share this show with a friend. And we always love 5-star reviews and positive comments. And you can like and follow all of our social media and YouTube accounts that we have here at Ono Media. Join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.